Cool.
So, Mogi, good to see you in person and a nice clear picture. For everyone else out there, my name is Julian Dirkes. I teach at the Institute of Asian Research at the University of British Columbia. I'm speaking today with Munkhdul, who also known as Mogi, who is the founder and CEO of CoverMongolia. And is a great source for keeping up with what things are happening in Mongolia. I think Mogi is probably the person I have bumped into accidentally the most on Ulaanbaatar streets. Somehow, there's always moments we bump into each other.
One day it was like twice a day.
Yeah, I think so, right? Somehow we end up sort of in the same general area. But as I said, I've got some topics I want to cover with Mogi to talk about, but we're happy to look at questions in the chat as well, and we're recording this so that we can release it later as a video. So Mogi, the part of the inspiration was that, Carnival in German is called the silly season sometimes, and then in North America, we generally talk about the silly season being the summer in politics, because Parliament is usually not in session, and that's the time when politicians come up with sort of crazy ideas and launch them in the media because not so many people are paying attention necessarily. So that's why I wanted to talk about the seasonality to Mongolian politics. And so, in your mind, what are there distinct sort of moments or seasons that come up in Mongolian politics?
Well, this year is different from any other year because we have elections coming up in late June. There's every time there's a parliament session, there's much more politicization going on. But right now, Parliament is in recess, but it will restart again in early April. But as it gets closer to the elections, the politics will certainly heat up, and even when Parliament is not in recess, is not in session, we would see more politicians on television, and I'm seeing that every day where political leaders are on every channel they can find, and season does play to it. Mongolian Parliament has 2 sessions every year, and it ends right before a major holiday. So this spring session, which starts in April, will end early July. And as you know, in July we have Nadam, one of our biggest holidays. And then the autumn session ends in February, which in February would be the Mongolian Lunar New Year, Tsaganser. So usually when Parliament is close to a holiday, you would see some different laws getting discussed more quickly than usual, and right before the session closes, you would see a bunch of laws getting passed. This year, I think with Parliament will probably end earlier than usual because of the election. So things will get more political as we get closer to the election.
And is there so the holidays are both the end points for the sessions, and so
right.
There's sort of a natural tendency, and this would be true if you had a board meeting in a company or an NGO or so too, right? If you have an endpoint, then you make some decisions. But beyond that, just the endpoint moment in time, is there a particular sort of flavor or sense to Tsaganser and Nadam in particular that are there a specific variety of laws that might be passed more before Tsagansa, or that might be passed more before Nadam? Anything like that?
I wouldn't see much of a difference in the types of laws, depending on the season. But every controversial law that was passed usually would end up getting discussed and approved right before a major holiday. But I wouldn't say there's a difference in the types of laws that gets passed or discussed. Usually laws gets passed quite quickly, discussed quickly, if they choose to discuss it. And I think even it takes less than a week to discuss a law, to discuss a bill and get it passed. Perhaps in much more seasoned parliaments, it would take much more time, but it can get quite quickly passed here.
Right. So what about the notion, and if we move outside of Parliament itself, it certainly seems like spring is the time for demonstrations, right? That's where most so that's when I think of a silly season in Mongolian political terms, it's demonstrations on Surpatra Square happen in spring. Is there anything to that sense?
Yeah, in the summer there's Nadam, so even political protesters don't tend to protest during Nadam season. Even politicians just turn off and disappear. The whole country so goes into holiday mood right around Nadam.
Right.
And Nadam can go on for a month and a half, where most of the public officials and even the private sector, most of those guys go on annual holidays. So starting from, let's say, second half of June till September, a lot of people would be on holidays, and it'd be hard to get things approved or get things decided during the season. Lunar New Year tends to end in just a week. A week is probably around, it's a 3-day holiday, but then if you squeeze in the weekends, it usually takes just about a week, and everyone's back to work.
You've got to digest and get over your hangover and that sort of thing after Tsagansa, right?
Right. So spring would be the natural season for anyone who wants to be publicly visible as a protest, and it gets a little warmer. Nobody does long demonstrations in the winter because it's very cold, minus 20, 30 degrees. Spring would be the natural, and then there's scientific things like spring syndrome, or people get a little crazy, or
I think frisky is what we might say, right? Romance is in the air, but so is protest.
Exactly.
Right. And historically, I mean, that's happened in Mongolia, right? I mean, if the original revolution and the MPRP was founded in the spring, right? The Democratic Revolution happened through demonstrations all winter, but really things sort of came to a heat in the spring as well, right? And then in 1990, the decision by the MPRP then to sort of relinquish power, peaceful as it was in response to a little bit of that spring craziness as well, right?
Yeah.
So if there is a little bit of a historical pattern to this, in this particular year, yes, the election changes the dynamic around a little bit, but what are the issues that might reduce demonstrations this spring, right? So last year, my sense was the topic that was that generated some protest demonstrations was domestic violence and child abuse, and we had those candlelight vigils last year, and that led to passage of a domestic violence law and the like. in the fall session. Is there a topic on the horizon that you foresee that we'll see demonstrations about? There's a big number of candidates I could think of as topics, but what's your sense?
Well, I'd say because of the election, it does change things a bit. So I'm expecting. I'm already starting to see some protests against the ruling power, the ruling parties.
Yeah.
Just last week, which was we had demonstrations. It said students are protesting the mayor having too many deputy mayors, which is it's weird to have political protests on, which is a little too specific, and a lot of the times protests are someone who paid for them to protest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yes, some protests happen organically or voluntarily, but a lot of the times, if you see a lot of people, most of them are paid students or unemployed people who get paid the specific rate, and there's already a rate.
And what's the going rate? What's the demonstration pay these days?
It's 20,000 a day. So
okay.
It's not exactly full day, but a day's worth of demonstration, you get paid around 20,000 tugruks a day.
And so when you say that last week there were demonstrations about Batu having too many deputies, so that was framed in terms of budget waste or resource waste, but your sense would be that at least some of that was higher demonstrations and primarily aimed towards campaigning.
Right.
Okay.
So there's a law on public administration that was passed last year, and it said the city mayor should have only 2 deputy mayors to save budget. But he continues to have, I think he has 8 deputies already, and they were protesting for 6 of them to get fired or to Batul to get rid of 6 deputy mayors. So in this case, and those guys who were protesting were wearing masks, and I'm always skeptical of anyone who protests wearing a mask, and they were wearing a specific mask that Batul was photographed wearing while showing the prime minister the waste disposal site, which is old and needs to get upgraded, and it's causing sort of an odor problem in the city last year. It broke down last summer. So Batul was the only guy wearing a mask, while the prime minister was not when they were visiting a waste disposal site.
Wow, what interesting imagery, right? And then for that mask to reappear, very interesting observation. And especially on an issue when, I mean, sometimes maybe masks make sense when protesters are worried about their safety because the issue is so sensitive, but deputies of the mayor is not exactly an issue that's going to get the Secret Service running and going after people, right? Yeah, very interesting. What about,
they were,
go ahead.
All sort of seem to be students, young kids, wearing those masks. So usually students will do anything if they get paid money. 20,000 will get them in the streets.
Right. And so you think that in terms of this year's silly season and protest season, it's just going to all be folded into campaign activities. So an issue like last year with the domestic abuse, domestic violence, right? That was a cross-party issue. It wasn't. I mean, the women's caucus was particularly active, and there were some social movements, but it was a substantive issue rather than a party politics issue, or so it seemed at least, right?
Well, that was more of an organic protest, and I think season didn't play much into it because people protested because a small child was killed because of domestic violence, was
Right.
beaten by his stepfather and mother. It happened because of that. People protested. There was an uproar in the social media, and that was more of an organic thing. So the Women Caucus just jumped on it, and the domestic violence bill was in Parliament already, but it wasn't on the agenda. So it sort of helped speed up the discussion of that bill. Not that some politician decided to submit a bill using this opportunity.
Right. So then Parliament has a seasonality, social protest does. So what about parties then in this election year? I mean, the two things that I see that are happening that are a little bit of silly season, and I don't know if it's because people are frisky or not, but one is the proposed merger of Civil Will into the DP,
right.
And then the other one is that the Hun Party has gone through various twists and turns related particularly to Gambata and his role in the party. And so what's going on? So why would Civil Will, and particularly why would the MPs, Oyun and Dembele, why would they join the DP at this point where their voices are potentially much less prominent as part of a bigger DP than they are by themselves in Parliament, right?
As for Oyun and Dembele, I sort of respect them as public officials, but they're not particularly very savvy politicians. In a way that they don't campaign well. They don't campaign much, and Civil War Green Party has sort of has been living on the tough. So Oyun's was living on the legacy of Oyun's brother, who was assassinated in 1998.
Right.
And he was a very prominent politician who was one of the protesters in 1990, the early democratic leaders. But particularly, I think Oyun, as a politician, she did not grow the party much. It has a loyal support base. But she hasn't done much to grow the party, become more visible. She didn't recruit much. So as a party alone, even with merging with the Green Party, it didn't grow the support base much. So if they run in the election alone, only a few people, Oyun or Dembele, might get elected through the party list.
Yep.
So they wouldn't be running in an election district. So,
but there's also I've heard that the election law was changed that you have to win at least one seat in a district before you can win seats by the list. Is that right?
I didn't read much the election law, but I think that's correct.
Okay, and so that's a little bit of a hurdle to them, right? Because, so for example, 2008, Oyun would have been elected directly. I think over on the west side of Ulaanbaatar was her district, right? But that might be a challenge for either of them to get that first direct seat so that the lists happen. And so
Oyun and Dembele were elected from the party list.
Yeah, that's right. In 2012, right? Yeah.
They didn't run in a election district.
Yeah.
So that means no one got a seat from the majority voted district.
Right.
So that says something about the Civil War Green Party, where none of them won a seat, running campaigning in the district. They all got voted in because of the party list, where 1/3 of the parliament gets elected through the proportional party list system.
That's right.
So particularly, but the reason why these merger talks are happening is no one seems to be the clear winner this election. And in particular, there's smaller parties are emerging where they might get a few seats as well, hurting the chances of the two major parties getting majority.
Mm-hmm.
So DP is trying to merge with Civil War Green Party, and then there's also talks of NPP, the second largest political party here at the moment, merging with the fourth largest political party. So they're all trying to win as much seats as they can, and they're all of these are related parties. One Civil War split from the DP,
Right.
NPRP split from the NPP. So they split, and then they're trying to merge again. It's all I think part of a plan to get as much seats as possible to be able to form the government.
So, like I said, political silly season, right? So then, really the story of the week. What's the deal with the Unification Church and the Moonies?
Well, and the only politician getting mixed in that is DP members.
Yeah.
So there's always been sort of anti-Moonie movement in Mongolia, but particularly right now it's heating up a lot to a point where a public official had to resign yesterday.
Who was that?
She was the head of strategic planning division at the education ministry.
Uh-huh.
A lady called Nasang Bayir.
Okay.
You might have seen her as a target in the anti-Moonie social media movement.
Right.
So she said she resigned yesterday because of all the heat. People don't usually resign here because of a bad image.
Right.
Yeah, but this was particularly unique, rare, I would say. But I think she resigned because of the attacks on her, and they even started to get her family involved in it. So I think she resigned out of fear for her family's safety.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So she's the public face of the Moonie sort of cult in Mongolia, and a lot of politicians are involved in it. We saw even the president is involved in it as well, where you see pictures of Elbig Dorj in a supposedly Moonie meeting in Korea. So what he was trying to do was raise money for his campaign.
Didn't we?
Apparently.
But there were pictures like that in 2013 in the presidential campaign already, right? Of him accepting money in Korea somewhere, and they're the same pictures again.
So it's the same picture.
Okay. So it's just sort of being represented as a Moonie influence peddling scandal.
Right.
Okay.
In 2013, there was not much mention of Moonie being the setting there.
Right.
But now they're saying it was the Moonies who brought Elbig Dorj to their meeting in Korea and supposedly gave him money, which is actually is illegal, getting election donations from
abroad,
from yeah.
Yeah. Well, terrific, Mogi. That's a great update on the spring silly season. Thank you so much. Maybe tell people how they can follow your analyses and work, and tell them a little bit about CoverMongolia if you want.
So CoverMongolia is a market intelligence firm. I collect information mostly from the public domain and put it into a daily email newsletter, a subscription newsletter. So I can put anyone on a 2-week trial subscription so they can see what their what they're getting before paying. It's the rates are 100,000 to 500,000 tugriks a month, depending on how many people from a particular organization are on the list. So bigger the company or organization, you pay more. The service is the same. I did that because I wanted everyone to be able to afford my newsletter, big or small. If I said it right, it would have been too cheap for some or too expensive for others. So I did a flexible rate on that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a lot of the things I find on the internet, I tweet them as well. So you can follow CoverMongolia on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Plus, even on Instagram. It's all CoverMongolia. All of them are CoverMongolia, so you find them easily on the social media.
Terrific. That's great. Those of you who want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at jdirkus, same user ID as here on Blab. And our Mongolia blog can be found. If you search on Google for Mongolia Focus, you'll find it right away. Hopefully you enjoyed this discussion, and we'll be back with more topics and more blabs in the future. Thank you.
So one other interesting sort of development happening in Mongolian politics is one of the newest political parties in Mongolia, called the National Labor Party. Mongolian abbreviation would be the Hung Party, which is the word for person. So there's a sort of analogy or an easy sort of a tag brand that they develop.
So we have the meat party Machnam, and we have the people party Hun. Good branding.
Yeah. Well, the National Labor Party was established actually in 2011 by Gambatar, the independent member of parliament, who's a prominent labor union leader for many years. So his followers established the party in 2011 for Gambatar. At that time, he was the president of the Mongolian trade union, and he was about to run independently for parliament. Elections were in 2012, of course, but for some reason, I'm guessing it was this political decision on his part to run independently instead of having to run from a party where you would have to have a lot of candidates for all of the districts, including not just for parliament, for all the local council elections as well.
Because there's party registration requirements as well, right? And right. Applications and different kind of deadlines than running as an independent.
Right. So I'm guessing it was much easier for him to run as an independent first, with the plan to sort of re-energize his party in the next election. So what happened was there were a bunch of sort of active clubs in UB where they were frustrated with politics and they wanted to do something, but they started by having like-minded people gather in a club setting to discuss what's wrong with our politics and how it could change. So those sort of political clubs joined together in 2014, late 2014, to form a sort of an umbrella club called the Hukjilhung Club. In English, it would be development human or people club.
Mm-hmm.
So that turned into and they declared themselves to be the new political force in Mongolia in early last year. And the guys behind it said, all right, and most of those guys were people who never were in politics, who never ran for election. Some of them held maybe some ministry level, mid-level ministry job, but they never were in politics. A lot of them were party members, MPP and DP mostly. So they were not well known publicly, and it was only a year and a half away till election. So it's a very short time to become nationally recognized. So they sort of decided, all right, we have the idea, we have the ideology, we have the political sort of strategy, but nobody knows us in Mongolia.
Right.
And Gambater was at that point, by polling, was the most popular politician.
Right. He came up first in that Sanma Politbarometer poll.
Right.
And was it in the fall sometime, right? Was it as the most mentioned? And,
So they talked to Gambater and then decided to sort of join forces. Gambater has a recognition, and the club has the sort of skills.
Yeah, and the ideas and the political reform sort of drive. Yeah.
So it was at that point they thought it was a win-win situation. So they took over the old Gambater's old sort of dead party that was already established and revitalized, gave it life, and started as a political party. The club people joined that party and took it over. And then with the plan for Gambater to officially declare himself a member of that party. It was his party, but he never became a member of it.
Right.
So he officially joined as a party member, and then he was elected the chairman of that party. And that's when things started to go down, sour.
Sideways, yep.
Sideways, right. So the political party had a board of 9 people, and so it had the party sort of congress, which decides the party central committee.
Yep.
Which has 57 members, and then that central committee elects the chairman of the party, and then the 9 board members. The 9 board members are, in charge of running the day-to-day activities of the party, and the 9-member board selects the general secretary of the party. So the general secretary would be the prime minister to Gambater's president.
Right.
A guy who's in charge of all the on-the-ground activity.
Yeah.
So
a CEO to a CEO, perhaps. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So the day before Tagansar, 5 board members sort of secretly convened and then decided to fire the general secretary while he was away, out of the country. So the other 4 members protested against what happened, saying that what they did was wrong. They could have waited for him to come back, and it was just an hour or two away from landing in UB.
Right.
That's when the board secretly convened and decided to fire him. So,
like I said, silly season in politics.
Well, that would have happened any time of the year, but particularly
fair enough. Yeah.
So in short, Gambatar tried to put his own person as the general secretary. So the general secretary was there from day one. He was the biggest financer of the early party needs, and he was there from the very beginning. He was there early from the very beginning when they decided to get together with Gambatar.
Mm-hmm.
So when Gambatar became chairman, he wanted to put his own person as a general secretary, but they did it in a way that the other side says it broke the party constitution.
Statutes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what happened was right now there's two national labor parties. Both of them say they're the legitimate National Labor Party, and they don't acknowledge the other side. So in March 18th. So in Mongolia, the Supreme Court of Mongolia registers political parties.
Mm-hmm.
So any changes in leadership in a political party, they have to apply to the Supreme Court to get it officially recognized. So both sides have sent applications to the Supreme Court saying, I'm the legitimate political party, have me registered.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things will become clear. We'll know which one is a clear, legitimate leader, because Gambatar was later ousted by the people who protested
as chairman. Yeah.
So we'll see how the Supreme Court decides which one is the legitimate chairman of it. Both sides have now the same. They have 2 Facebook pages, 2 Twitter accounts. All of them are named National Labor Party, and the logo is the same. So it's a little confusing for ordinary people. There's one Gambatar going around visiting people, and then there's the other side. There's the other chairman going around also saying, "I'm the real National Labor Party chairman." So
right.
Very confusing. There was a lot of expectations put on this party because all of the people are frustrated with the already political establishment, namely the 2 major parties.
With the 2 big parties, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so the National Labor Party was people who are educated. There was out of the 9 members, I think it was like 8 who have master's degree, and then 3 who have PhD. So they're very intellectual sort of group of people that the people, not just the people, but the people in the business world sort of had hopes on. So because of this development, a lot of people's hearts were broken. So we'll see in just a week's time, less than a week actually, which way this is going to go.
Okay, I mean, this is going to be one of the stories, I think, leading into the election, right? That we are seeing a little bit of a shift to the party landscape. We talked earlier about civil will, and if that merges into DP, that's also a shift. I mean, you talked a little bit about their effectiveness as a political movement. Nevertheless, we've been used from the last several elections to a multi-party setup, right? And so and of course, with the split of Machnam from the MPP, that has sort of reinforced that multi-party status. But with these mergers, on the one hand, narrowing down the number of parties, but on the other hand, new movements like the Hun Party coming up, it's definitely one of the things to watch about this election, I think, is to see whether that party landscape shifts around or just solidifies in many ways, right?
Right. But the merger hasn't finalized yet.
No, it's still Right, it's under proposal, right, under review for the
Under
various party
proposal,
bodies.
yes. So Civil War Green Party leaders are signed an MOU on merging, but they have to have their party congress or the central committee or whatever it's called in their party to decide. So, but I'm hearing it's going to be hard. It's unlikely that the Civil War Green Party Congress, let's say, approves this merger.
Because the membership would be opposed.
Yes, the membership would be opposing us merging with DP.
Right.
But even if that happens, I would say there's a chance they would form a coalition with DP if they can't merge.
Well, sure. I mean, as they have in the past, right, on Tanhuyak,
right.
And that was a reasonably natural combination. I mean, as you mentioned earlier,
right.
Civil Will emerged out of the democratic movement in any case,
right.
and so that's not a surprising combination.
This time would be different, where Civil War Green Party joined the coalition after the election.
Right.
They formed a coalition when forming the government, but they ran as independently as a party in 2012. I'm saying that this time it'll be before they'll join forces before the election.
Oh, so they'll declare. But they did that in the presidential election, right? Because they didn't run a candidate and supported Ebekdorj's bid.
Right. And same for the other side as well. The MPP and MPRP, both one split from the other. It's probably getting too late to merge already. But I'm thinking they'll probably again decide to join forces either before or after the election as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, lots of stories to watch in the spring political season up to the election, and then there'll be plenty more stories for the presidential election next year.
Right.
So, Mogi, thanks so much.
My pleasure.